Because I've always just been a solo artist, and I was always jealous of people in groups. I always wanted to have like a duo or a trio or something like that.
Sure.
But how do you guys like maintain a sense of like artistic individuality in something like the Glitch Mob, you know, and feel like you're still getting out what you need to get out and expressing yourself as an individual while sort of contributing to the whole of it?
I mean, outside of the Glitch Mob, it's like we do continue to create on a personal level, right? It's like Ed said this not that long ago, and it really kind of like hit home, where it's like, not to take these words out of your mouth, Ed, but you said at one point that you make music, whether it's like a demo idea, or you're just kind of messing around the studio, you make an idea for yourself. And if it ends up into the Glitch Mob pot, then great. If not, it's still something that is like Ed being an artist, right? And I just thought that was so dope of like, okay, yeah, you're making this music because that's what you want to make, regardless of collaboration or the band or whatnot. It's like, so I think there is like always a solo expression even in the band, you know. It's like when I make something, I'm just making what I know how to make, or I'm feeling it, or I'm in the zone or whatnot, and then toss it in the pile. And if it's like, you know, if the guys are feeling it and it becomes a thing, then great. If not, that's okay. Like I have other outlets in myself, and I could, do whatever, release it on my own, or, you know,
right.
There's always this element of like, we're always going to be like making music regardless of the collaboration. And it's just great when it syncs up, you know. Obviously it's just me and Ed on here right now. Justin is kind of like taking a sabbatical or something in a way. He's not out of the band.
Sure.
But he's just not really involved in a lot of stuff right now.
Yeah, I guess like the opinions of Glitch Mob in this conversation are more just going to be from the standpoint of myself and Josh.
Right.
Obviously, J-Bo is kind of, you know, I guess like on a spiritual level here with us, but obviously like, you know, he can't speak for himself on this Zoom call. You know what I mean? So,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, like Justin's our boy for life, no matter what.
Oh, it happens,
exactly.
Man. It happens. I mean, it's, you know, I think that's, like a second ago, I was saying that, you know, I was always sort of jealous of people who are in groups and all that. But then, of course, it adds layers of complication because everybody's got their own lives and everybody's evolving as a person individually as well as the group. And I don't know. I sometimes think about that, like when you're like kids on a swing set, and sometimes like the swings are in sync, you know, and then every once in a while they get out of sync, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
And it's
exactly.
Yeah.
I love that.
Because I want to talk a lot about this new album because I really fucking love this album. It's
Thanks.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, no, for real. Like anyone I have on the podcast, like I either like their music in some way or think it's valuable or interesting in some way. But you know, this album, I fucking love it, man. And it's a
thank you, man.
Dude, I'm glad you guys did it. And it's a wild shift from, you know, I think what people have heard from you before as the Glitch Mob. Obviously, I know both of you guys have background as solo DJs before the Glitch Mob. And, you know, we talked about, you know, the breaks stuff for you, Josh, and the jungle and the IDM for you, Ed, and all of that. So I can of course hear those influences in this. How did this happen? Like, were you just writing music and this is what it sounded like and you kind of ran with it? Or was this kind of an intentional shift?
No, not really. You know, I obviously the pandemic happened, right? You know, we were supposed to go on this kind of like 10-year Glitch Mob anniversary edition of Drink the Sea tour. The whole thing canceled worldwide. You know, the pandemic happened. We all decided to unplug and, you know, just take a break from music and stuff. You know, I think prior to the pandemic, obviously, Drink the Sea Excluded, I think Love, Death, Immortality, and See Without Eyes, I think those records were primarily, there was always the thought of kind of like having those songs be ammunition for the Blade. The Blade was our old, it was like our live stage production and custom instrument that we had designed. So there was like a good chunk of the past 15 years of Glitch Mob or so that were influenced heavily by the Blade. In a post-Blade paradigm, there were a couple years before the pandemic where, the vision of where we're headed was a little bit, uncertain and murky, because it was decided that, we were no longer going to perform with the Blade anymore. And, there were a couple weird years where, we just tried a bunch of different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And not to cut you off, but just out of curiosity, did you sort of just feel like, what else can we do with the Blade? Like we've kind of taken this idea as far as it's going to go. Because for people who haven't seen it, it was such a crazy
I think to some degree, a little bit, yes. I think there were also just kind of like, I think it was just like the economics of touring also just like weren't really in our favor with that,
because that must have been crazy expensive to tour with. Now that you're saying it, I never 100%. Really thought about that.
It's like, when you decide you want to participate in the production arms race, it's not a cheap race to participate in.
Yeah.
But I think there were a couple, just kind of, years prior to the pandemic where the vision of Glitch Mob was a little directionless, so to speak. The pandemic happened. Obviously, prior to Glitch Mob, where we all came from was very much rooted in old school rave culture. You know what I mean? Myself being a resident DJ of Concrete Jungle in Los Angeles, which then would evolve into me and Daddy Kev starting Low End Theory together. Like Jungle has always, been a part of my DNA since I was a teenager. Obviously Josh as well too, with Breaks, residency at the Moore Bar and stuff, obviously Burning Man culture and stuff, kind of like that whole, like era when, the whole Breaks thing exploded out here stateside. Josh was, definitely part of that on the ground level and stuff. So, I think for a long time in Glitch Mob, we had, I think the vision was very much crafted around the Blade. And I think from a more marketing sort of standpoint, what we were doing was very much modeled after what a lot of other American electronic acts were doing, which the whole ethos is just grow everything bigger, better, play bigger stadiums, right. Sell out bigger venues, have more over the top stage production. You know what I mean? Pretty much every American artist that's participating in the quote unquote EDM paradigm is doing that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think after a while, especially after, we decided that, we're going to bring an end to the Blade era, it was a good opportunity to just kind of, I think hit the reset button and reassess what we wanted to do. It's obviously when you have the Blade and you're making ammunition for the Blade, music just inherently always kinds of ends up sounding a particular way. Maybe if you didn't even need heavy taiko drums or percussion on a track, you inherently are probably going to write it in there because, we're going to be performing it on the Blade. And it's it's going to have a dope moment where it's going to it's going to have a lot of energy or bring drama to that moment in the set or whatever. You're going to be kind of thinking in that paradigm. So in a post Blade paradigm, it was just a good opportunity to wipe the slate clean, be there's no Blade. We have an opportunity to do literally whatever the hell we want to do.
Yeah.
What would be something dope to do? I think at that time, I don't think it was a conscious thing to be yo, this whole rave revival thing is cracking right now. We should jump on this train. I think it's just, a sound that we've inherently just always been in love with. And, it's just kind of one of those things where what would it sound like if we made old school, rave music,
yeah.
Whether jungle, slow down 140 jungle, warehouse techno, you know what I mean? Like whatever it may be, what would it sound like if we did that? And, essentially Control Alt Reality kind of came out of that idea.
Well, that's part of what I really like about it, is that you're actually making the music, because I think, you mentioned this sort of like rave revival thing that's kind of popular right now, at least in certain circles. But to me, so much of that is people kind of looking back at the older rave era and being like, yeah, that was cool. These sounds were cool. And then they'll reference it a little bit, or maybe they'll sample a single rave stab or a single break. Mm-hmm. But it's all kind of, my problem with a lot of it is that it's just very referential without really sort of engaging with the actual music of that time period. Whereas I feel like Control Alt Reality, like, you guys just made the tunes. Like, this is just sort of...
Yeah, it was, I mean, like, the goal was to really, kind of really stay true to the vibe and spirit of like all those dope, like classic, old school, kind of like rave cuts that we're into. However, make it hit on a modern day sound system.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that stuff, it's like, it sounds sick. It sounds classic. It like musically still holds up, but a lot of it doesn't like really hit properly on like a modern day sound system. Yeah. So that was kind of like the only, like I think thing to kind of like bring it back into modern day times was kind of like, yeah, let's like write something that kind of has that classic rave sound, the vibe and the feel. Keep it much more about the vibe, right? But we engineered it in a way to where it's still going to hit crazy hard on a festival rig. So, it's kind of basically the idea.
I love
it. I really like what you said there, Willie. It was like, it's not referential. It's that sound and that feeling, that vibe all the way through. And that was the part of the goal, was like, yeah, let's not just make like some slamming modern day tunes and throw some, rave stabs or, pitched vocal sample that sounds like 1990 rave culture. It was like, let's embrace that and kind of just like run with it and see what happens. And I think once we started doing that in the studio, it got so exciting that we were like, let's even take that further, like keep pushing that and running within the energy. It was like, as we were kind of trying these demos out and kind of like working on the songs, it was like, no, like keep that thing going. Yes. Like let's keep rolling with it. Oh shit. Like let's add more of that big rave feel in it. It was like, we felt so comfortable and in our zone and in the pocket doing it because we knew that was in our DNA. It wasn't like we were all of a sudden just like picking up another genre and being like, oh, let's go make this genre. It's like, obviously it is, a new genre for us in a way, but it wasn't like it came out of thin air. It was almost like these last, 10, 15 years, that's been brewing. And it's just now we've let it out,
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's so funny. I don't know why, but recently on the podcast, I've been like obsessed with this idea. I talk about it all the time and people are probably sick of it, but I feel like at a certain point for anyone with a long enough career, you end up going back to the beginning and you end up sort of just realizing that like you were right the first time and that like all the shit you loved when you were a kid and when you were just starting off is still in some way like the most creatively like fertile ground,
right.
And it's just a weird thing because you see it over and over and over, but then it's one of those things that and I've been doing it too with some of my music and a lot of people I talk to, and it's just one of those things that I don't know. It's like you have to do this long enough to sort of exhaust other avenues and exhaust other ideas before you can really get back to it in that way. And it's, I don't know why that's the path.
Yeah. I mean, listen, man, like classic rave sounds, you know what I mean? Korg M1 pianos, amen breaks, like that stuff is never, ever going to go out of fashion. It's literally no different than, hip hop producers looping up soul. You know what I mean? Those type of feelings, like, that's forever going to be sounds that are, just always going to be a vibe in dance music culture, in my opinion. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, I mean, they are the building blocks of like why this culture started, right? It's like, I mean, those are the sounds that built the rave. You know, they came out of whatever, like the 80s disco era or whatever. It was like the sounds that those producers at the time were using were those amen breaks and the, you know, the pianos, because that's what was available, you know, and those are the building blocks. And we wanted to embrace those building blocks and be like, how would we use these in 2022?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Also, like a big part of it is like, hey man, listen, you know, we've been at this music thing for, I mean, like over 15 years or something like at this point, you know what I mean? And, you know, like when you're a lot younger as a producer, you know, you make music. Well, I mean, not everybody, but, you know, I think at least like a lot of people, I guess, maybe in the parallel scenes that we're involved in, right? Like you will make music in a way to try to impress people somehow, no matter what that is, whether that means with crazy production tricks or insane buildups and bass drops or whatever. You know, I think like for us, it's like, hey man, you know, it's like we've been at this thing for 15 years. We've traveled the world multiple times over, played our music, played every epic festival, you know, venue on the planet that there is to play. There's really nothing left to prove. So, you know, with this record, there's no need to impress anybody with like crazy production tricks or tropes or whatever. You know, I think just really staying true to just kind of like making tunes that are just a dope vibe, not overthinking it. You know what I mean? And just like keeping the spirit of the music just that, you know, and having that be our guiding light, essentially.
Something that really stuck out to me, Josh, is when you were talking about sort of the building blocks of this music, and that, because I never really thought about it this way, but you're right. If we think back to like the start of electronic music, the tool set was so limited. It was such a smaller pool of just shit you could even make the music with, right?
Right.
And that's kind of fascinating that we can really look back to specific, you know, pieces of gear that made specific sounds and specific samples. Like, I mean, the amen break, like if the amen break didn't exist, what would dance music even sound like, you know? Like there's just these very small pool of tools that, you're right, birthed everything else that was going to come. And maybe that's a way that sort of this scene is different from other scenes, is that it is obviously reliant on technology, but the heart of it is reliant on a very small set of technology.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I remember listening to drum and bass back in the day and jungle and stuff like that. Like when I first got into it in high school, and, you know, listening to tunes and starting to get familiar with producers and kind of like, oh, I love this producer for this reason. And, you know, you hear these breaks in there, you're like, yeah, there it is. Oh, when that crazy shreddy amen comes in, you're just like, yes. But I remember also specifically hearing new breaks in tunes over time. Was like, oh shit, like what is that one? Like I've never heard that one before. And like all of a sudden, you know, it's like some producer like unlocked another key of being like, yo, this break from this track, blah, 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 pitched this way and sped up this way. I was like, oh, damn, that's a whole nother. That was the production trick, right? It was like, dude, like I remember vividly hearing Hive play back when I was like 15, 16 and like play some tunes. I was like, I've never heard this drum sound before or this bass sound. I was like, you know, so it's like there was so much there. It was like a simple discovery that unlocked more versions of this thing we were obsessed with, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, it was like almost like, you know, Congo Natty Records era style stuff was like just like nothing but amens. And then, you know, kind of like at the turn of the century, you know, the switch flip. We're like, oh, you know, so much more out there we can use.
Right.
Yeah, why are we using this one thing? Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, so much of it too was about the discovery process and the hunt of it too, right? You know, that back when everyone was digging for samples no one had used yet. And
well, technology also played a humongous role into it as well too, because by the time like drum and bass really had its heyday, I would say like kind of around the turn of the century, I'm talking like, you know, Renegade Hardware era, you know, like when Usual Suspects and like Conflict's Messiah, like when that whole thing was popping, that was kind of like the first ushering in of, you know, drum and bass created on a computer with VST instruments. You know, prior to that, a lot of the jungle that was being produced and stuff, like you needed something like a, you know, like an EMU 6400, like that was a sampler of choice. Back then, you know, some sort of hardware thing, you know, you were coming into a board and summing everything. But as a result, like, you know, like a lot of the super classic jungle tunes that we're all such big fans of, you know, like the technology was just more arcane back then. And the fact that it all sounds so amazing is crazy, you know, like when you listen to those tunes, you're just like, damn, like you're telling me that you literally like loaded up all these sounds on an EMU 6400 and like summed it into a mixing console and got, you know, Simon from The Exchange to cut it onto vinyl. That's why it sounds so good. You know what I mean? It's like, didn't have the tools that we have now. You know what I mean? Right. So, you know, I think that was like a big part of it too, was, you know, when drum and bass really, really began to take off. Like I remember like the version of Logic that was being used was like Logic 4.8.1. And it was like Pro Tools had its very first version of Pro Tools LE. It was like Pro Tools like 5.1 LE. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was like audio units didn't even exist yet, you know, and Logic Pro was still owned by eMagic. You know what I mean? And that was like the dawn of, you know, kind of like drum bass being made on a computer with like no hardware, you know?
Yeah, God, kidding. So, I mean, I wasn't like in the scene like that at that point, but I wonder how people, and Ed, maybe you can even speak to this depending, but
I'll just tell you this, Ableton like didn't even exist yet.
Right.
Like I remember like, I think it was like 6 months after like Logic 4.8.1 came out and they hadn't even been acquired by Apple yet. And then that's when Ableton 1 came out. And then I started using Ableton full time during Ableton version 2.
Man, that's incredible. But was there a reaction from people making drum and bass at the time, like either positively or negatively towards that technology shift? Because I think anytime there's like a new method, there's always sort of this negative reaction at first of people being like, oh, that's, you know, either that's cheating or that's not the real way to do it, that kind of thing. And then eventually over time, it becomes accepted and incorporated.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's just kind of like, you know, like it just ushered in a whole new sound, you know, the whole just kind of like one note bass line, Renegade Hardware style sound, you know, a lot of that really just came from a place of, like I think like modern day computer, like production tools, you know, like slowly beginning to drift away from like the EMU 6400 and those like Akai rack mount samplers. Honestly, if a lot of those guys, if they could have had all the tools that Dillinger had at the time, I think they would have done that. But, you know, by the time that, you know, Logic 4.8.1 hit the scene and stuff like that, it was just like, oh, well, damn, like I can basically do all this inside of a computer. You know what I mean? It's just going to be faster. It's going to be easier. I could do it on a laptop. You know what I mean? And, you know, the culture began to drift away from hardware. And yeah, I mean, not everybody can be Dillinger and have like a beautiful like analog console and just like slam the thing super hard and get your songs to sound like how he did back in the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think, you know, like I think the computer was just kind of like a necessary tool to push the culture forward, as it still continues to be this day. You know what I mean? We hear so much like brilliant kind of like new music happening that's, you know, that's like all just like guys like making music on a laptop and stuff. And, you know, there's forever going to be the debate over like what's better. Is hardware better than than software or whatever. And, you know, like to me at this point in time, like after having made music for this long, it's like, no, man, the end result is just like, is the music good or is it not? Did you have fun making it or did you not? You know,
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't really matter if it was made on hardware or not. You know what I mean? So
no, I agree, man. And I think it's interesting because I think Glitch Mob has always sort of played with technology. Like I always think of you guys as being interested in technology and the intersection between technology and music and technology and art in general. And it's because we've kind of talked about both sides of this now already in this conversation of like how technology can enable us to push boundaries and to do things in new, exciting ways and make new ideas and new sounds. But then also, you know, talking about like the Blade stage that almost, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but to me, it's like hearing you talk about it, it's like it almost got so big that like you couldn't control it anymore, you know, like if when you're writing music to satisfy the stage, you know what I mean? Or like writing music that will sound good when performed in a certain way through this technology. Like it's this really interesting push-pull of like, we need it and we want to keep embracing it. But then at a certain point, we sort of have to fall back on the human aspect.
Yeah, I think it became kind of a, you know, it became a little bit of a ceiling for us having the Blade, you know, and it was hard for us to depart from that. One, because obviously we invested a lot of money into it, you know, like it was like, okay,
Yeah.
we spent all this money and time and energy and built this beautiful thing. Tons of like research and development, you know, it was a huge, long, fun process.
And it was so cool.
It
was such a cool
yeah,
thing.
it
like
was.
It looked insane. Like you know, when I actually, because I think at some point you guys sort of talked me through how it all was routed and how it all actually worked. I mean, nobody was doing shit like that. It was very cool.
Thanks, man.
Thanks,
yeah,
man.
it was just such a fun time. I mean, it was our way to express our music. You know, we got to, you know, rock the fuck out. It was like so punk rock of us in a lot of ways. It was like we really got to bang on these things and like try to physically recreate the energy of the songs that were being written at that time. But at some point, it kind of, we hit a ceiling with it because it was just like, well, and I don't really think we even consciously knew this, but it took us kind of having to lay the Blade to rest to kind of realize like, oh, wait a second. There is this whole other side of our career, our production chops, our want and love to make new music that we can explore not having to think about the Blade in any way. You know, I think this is one of the first times in a long time for us that we're able to be like, you know what, like the music we're interested in making right now and everything, it's like, let's just go DJ that out. Like that sounds fun. That's our Blade right now. It's like, that's just where we kind of come back to, like you said in the beginning. It's like, you know, everything kind of comes back around again. It took us going all the way with the Blade and kind of hitting that wall and being like, you know what? I think it's time to depart from this and see what's next and let the just nature of our artistry pave that way. And CTRL ALT REALITY is what came from that. And kind of like looking at it now being, you know, because we went through a grieving period when the Blade era was done. You know, we right. all on our own, yeah, we mourned the loss of that thing that we built and toured and loved and enjoyed, and so many people got to experience. You know, it was a phenomenal era. You know, like I think about, we got to play that thing at Coachella at sunset and just like a beautiful packed Sahara tent. It was like, this is what this thing was built for, you know?
Yeah.
And so grieving and mourning the loss of that thing, it took us, you know, almost the whole pandemic to kind of like come down from that and be like, okay, you know what? We still got this and we still want to make music and enjoy our studio time and write music that we're going to just love and want to do. And that's, yeah, man, it felt, I think once we came through the other side, we were like, yes, I'm so glad this all went the way it did, because we allowed ourselves to open our minds again and kind of think outside the box and just kind of like get back to enjoying making music and not have to think of like, how is this going to perform on the stage? How am I going to play this part live? We shouldn't write it too complex because we got to chop up every note and make sure it fits into the sequencer the way that the blade works. It was like, you know,
Also
now it's just kind of like,
play it as well too.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, yeah, I think subconsciously we're just ready to depart from that. And I'm glad we did, you know, because I think we're now, you know, we're in a whole new era of ourselves creatively, personally, spiritually as a band. It's like the doors are open again. The options are endless for us, you know?
Well, and that's like the most punk rock thing anyone can do anyway, right? Is like tear down everything you've done and just start again. And I mean, honestly, I think it's a move not a lot of established artists do, because I think it's a scary move to make. But I think it's the most punk thing you can do is, you know, just be like, no, we have so many ideas, you know, that was just one. Like, let's try another one.
Yeah, it was nice to kind of feel like we weren't defined by this stage piece that we spent so many years and so much time and energy putting together. You know, it was like there was a defined period where it's like, you know, we didn't get booked unless it was like the Blade show or this or that. It's like,
oh, that's
not who we are. That was just like a thing we did. But if you look at our career before the Blade, there were many versions of ourselves. It's just the Blade was like, I think, the biggest and most wowing thing in that, in it kind of intersect, like Ed said, was like the time period where the EDM production race was like all blooming. It was like, oh, okay. Yeah, if we just keep making this bigger and better and more unique, that's the goal. And it kind of aligned perfectly with that, you know. But it's very on par for us to tear it down and start again. We've done that many times, musically in the studio, performance wise, visually, you know, it's like, we just get, you know, we get stale, and then it's like, all right, let's do that. Let's get that out of here. Let's redo this.
I mean, I love that, man. To me, it's inspirational because I don't know, like I get frustrated. I think there's a frustration a lot of people have with sort of the biggest of the big EDM stages, where it's sort of the, you know, the enormous LED walls and the CO2 and the pyro and all that. Like, all of that spectacle is cool and it's awesome to watch. Like, it looks cool to just look at. Sure. But I think the sameness of it is sort of making everyone's music the same at a certain point. Like, I think the other people are sort of running into that same issue with other delivery vehicles, you know, of like, we have to make this work on a giant festival stage and that sort of thing. And for the overall dance scene, like, I think, I don't know, I'm glad we're talking about it, because I think this is, people complain about sort of the homogenous nature of dance music on the biggest stages. But to me, I think part of the reason why it is that way is because it's all being presented the same way too, you know?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you know, at least stateside in America, there's such this focus on, you know, in American EDM culture is like constantly grow the thing bigger, better, more and more massive, like more and more crazier LED walls and stuff. As a result, you know, everything becomes a little bit more homogenized, you know, like across the pond, you know, they've got lineups on festivals there where it's like, you know, those kinds of lineups would never happen stateside, you know, presenting like really kind of like more like unique, like left field artists and stuff. It's like, it's pretty much like, if it's not, you know, some slamming EDC arena EDM, then, you know, it's pretty much like determined that, you know, it's not going to work on a big stage. And, that's, yeah, like I think that's a little bit of a shame, I think it's going to take America some time to kind of get to a place where electronic music can be sophisticated enough to where ideas that are more left to center can still have a place on big stages, but we're not quite there yet. But I think a big thing for us was just like after a while, we looked at the whole entire thing and we're just like, well, we shouldn't let that dictate who we are as musicians and artists. It's like, I think it's really easy to just kind of fall into the American EDM paradigm when you're an American artist and just be like, well, this is the playbook. Let's just go do that. And if we follow the rules, we should be straight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for us, we're just like, fuck that, man. You know what I mean? Like, let's just go out and do us. You know what I mean? And let's let the chips fall where they may. And if we're not out there playing the craziest, biggest festival stages, then who the fuck cares? You know what I mean? Like, we're still out there having a blast, crushing it every single night. And that's what the spirit of this whole entire tour run was, coming back to the underground. For me, it's like, I just feel so grateful and thankful that the whole thing was sick and it all worked out well. It's like sometimes when you get big as an artist, like I think there's like a certain point, especially with a lot of these American EDM artists, it's like they might not be able to ever come back to the underground. Like they might be so big to where if and when they are going to eventually want to do that, the underground's just going to be like, nah, man, like this isn't authentic. You're too mainstream or like whatever, you know what I mean?
Like you
but
left
for us,
us,
like I'm super grateful that for us, like, like the welcome back was like incredibly warm between like all the artists and musicians on the culture that were like, sending us tunes, obviously to the promoters that understood the vision of like, yeah, we're trying to get away from the whole crazy EDM arms race thing. Like we're trying to take it back to just kind of like the vibe, the sound system, and the tunes. You know what I mean? Super thankful to all the promoters that understood, and then obviously to all the people that pulled up to all the shows. So yeah, man, I think that was like a lot of the spirit of like what this record was about, was like really trying to break away from the mold, not just do the comfortable legacy artist thing and just be like, oh, well, we could just keep on playing EDC and do these things or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And really try to be like, no, like let's do something that feels authentic and real to ourselves, and if it means that we're not out there like slaying the biggest of stages, it's totally fine. We've done all that before.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we played like every fucking massive festival on the planet. You know what I mean? It's like, we're good. That was like really the ethos and the spirit of Control Alt Reality as well too.
Well, and this last tour that you guys just did, for anybody who didn't know, it was kind of this like sort of back to the roots, like DJing in dark clubs, like intimate spaces, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I mean, how fun was that, man? Because I saw some videos of you guys and I was just like, God damn, that looks fun. Just like
it was
fucking
so
sweaty sick, little warehouses ripping drum and bass.
It was so sick, man. It was like so many nights, it's like we were like within, the distance of having a beer spilled on your gear. Like that's the kind of danger I wanted to feel those nights. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to feel that kind of energy. Not
totally.
Not that there's anything wrong with that Coachella stage Red Rocks energy. It's just a different kind of energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But being in those like super crammed, intimate rooms where like literally someone's face is like 2 feet away from you. You know what I mean? It was just a vibe, man. And it was,
Yeah, there was definitely something very special about it. It just, it took so much of the rock starness out of the whole thing, which I think at a certain point we just got to where it was like, I'm super grateful for all those things we've done and the big stages and the big tours and all that stuff. It just didn't really feel totally comfortable and natural for us as much growing and getting older and, things like that, where this version of it, I mean, we were literally on the ground floor most of the nights. It was like, literally standing on the floor with everyone at the table on the ground. It was like, you got to look at people right in the eye and, people got to look at each other around all in this thing together. It was very connected. And I think that's something in a post-pandemic era is what we are all craving, like we spent whatever, 2 years not doing that. So it was kind of like, hey, what's the version of this, show thing that we could do that feels connected? We're on the same level. Something we wanted to also get back into was like, just like the dance party of it, right? It's like so many shows that I've played, I've been to as a just attendee. It's like I get kind of tired of just like looking at the stage up at this one thing over and over again. Yeah, and not there's anything wrong with it. People are going to keep doing it. It's all good. It's just, I think we felt after a while, it's just like, like where is this going to go? Like what's really next? What is just something a little different, doesn't need to be bigger and better. In fact, like what if we went smaller and more raw, less things, less lights, less everything, and kind of just see what happens, And it like I said, it turned out to be sick, and it was raw, it was wild, it was fun, it was like sweaty, grimy, speakers next to your face. It's like, it really had this feeling that when I was a kid, started going to raves in New Orleans, I was like, oh wait, this is kind of like that again,
Right. Yeah. Well, can we real quick, I wanted to touch on this because I think the last time that you guys were on the podcast, we talked about, like where you came from and how you met and all that, but we didn't really talk about like, growing up and like getting into music and that kind of thing. So for you, Josh, like, New Orleans, you're growing up there, you're a kid, like a two-part question, I guess, is like, just what was for you, your experience of being a kid in New Orleans, which is such a unique, fascinating place in this country. Like what, just whatever it means to you, like what was childhood like? What do you think about when you think about childhood? And then getting into the rave scene there, what was that like? Because I have to imagine that must have been somewhat unique too for the country.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure. I mean, growing up in New Orleans, as I look back now, I'm super grateful. It was like you said, a very unique place, very different. The culture down there is not like anywhere else in the country. It is very European feeling. It is this kind of like, wild, wild west in a way. There's no curfew on things. There's no, like you got to stop drinking at 2 and go home. It's like, no, like everything is open 24 hours if they want to be, I think just that alone gives New Orleans this like raw chaoticness, also throwing Mardi Gras into there every year. It's like, there's every year there's a multi-week party happening in the streets everywhere in the city. And growing up with that, gratefully and luckily my parents were into it, it's like me and all 4 of my siblings were out there, celebrating, with hundreds of thousands of people. So it just had this kind of like raw celebratory feeling always being down there.
Yeah.
I think so much of that is really, I don't know, like what really got me into this culture of like, underground dance music and things like that.
What was the rave scene like there?
The rave scene was amazing, man. Like, I mean, the very iconic rave promoter, Disco Donnie, who's done thousands and thousands of shows from the late 90s till today across the country,
still
is that's where he cut his teeth. Like throwing the parties that I was going to were all Disco Donnie shows. The very first raves in New Orleans were thrown by him. The most iconic rave that basically got shut down by the feds, like in the, I think it was like, I want to say like 99 or something like that, which caused a policy to go in place, which was called the Rave Act for a few years in the South. I mean, they basically banned raves. Like if you had electronic music and lights in a venue, they considered a rave, and it was illegal. You know, like it was all shut down.
Right.
Like I was at
Yeah, this was like,
the rave.
that was like a federal law, right?
Yeah,
like a federal
totally.
law. Yeah,
it was. And many promoters went to jail for it. You know, Donnie included. You know, so there was this raw energy around it because it was that, you know, and they continued,
Right.
The raves continued, you know, it was like very much, you know, call this number, get the address type thing, you know, a lot of warehouses, that classic rave culture. But it was amazing, man. I mean, it was so beautiful. I mean, I can picture the State Palace Theater, which was kind of like one of the iconic rave venues. There was always this side room, the jungle room, and it was like fully like graffitied, and it had, you know, that like late 90s tag, like B-boy thing. It was like, it was so dope, you know, and it was New Orleans. So it was raw as fuck. There was no curfew, you know, we would be in there, kids partying, listening to jungle all night long, you know. And
what age did you start going to that kind of stuff, do you think?
Let's see. I graduated high school when I was 17, and I was probably going, so yeah, like 15.
Yeah, right.
It was like probably my first rave. I was going to like punk and hardcore shows before that. And the reason I end up going to a rave in the first place was I would go to these hardcore shows down near the French Quarter. And it's just this cool little like hall venue thing. And I remember being at this hardcore show, and the show was over maybe around, I don't know, midnight, 1 o'clock or something like that. We were all outside in the streets, and this van pulls up, and there's these kids like with dollies, like lugging in sound system, cinder blocks to kind of put the turntables on. They would build up the cinder block, you know, table essentially. And they basically, you know, they loaded in a rave after that hardcore show and went till, you know, wee hours of the morning. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, this is so interesting. And I stuck around. They just were like banging out trance music, you know, until 6 a.m. I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. Like, sign me up. I'm never going to the hardcore shows again. I bought my Jenkos. I got my visor, and I was like, let's go. And then every weekend since then, I was finding the rave.
Man, and still to this day, right?
This day, I'm finding the rave, bro. So.
well, Ed, for you, because were you born in Boston? Grew up there?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's a very different place than New Orleans. That's when I think about Boston, I don't think about. Boston to me is like, everyone from Boston is like, there's like maybe, I don't know if repression is the right word, but there's like a certain like aggressive energy in Boston when I think about people I know from there.
Yeah, totally. Boston's got like a very hometown vibe. You know, obviously there's tons of colleges there, so it's definitely got like a big, massive influx of young academics. But at the time when, you know, I was in high school, I think one of the most instrumental things in Boston that happened was there was this record store called Forefront Records on, man, I want to say like Newbury Street or something, somewhere in Back Bay, fancy part of Boston. And at the corner was the Boston Satellite Records. So there's a Satellite Records, iconic, legendary New York rave vinyl store. There was one in Boston, Massachusetts as well too. But literally on that kind of same block on the second floor was this place called Forefront Records that was owned by this guy called Scotty G. And he was a drum bass DJ, and all they sold in there were drum bass records. And Wednesday nights he had his club night on Lansdowne Street. I forgot what it was called.
Okay.
It was called like Time Stretch, or I forgot what it was called. But anyways, I saw some like crazy acts in there, man. Dillinger, Ronnie Size, Bad Company, like
what era?
J-Magic.
What era is this? Is this like early 2000s? Like
before, man. I think this was like around 97.
Yeah.
98.
And
like Dillinger, you know, the Angels Fell, like that kind of era stuff, like early 31 Records era,
right,
of stuff. So kind of like the post super OG jungle, Congo Natty, like, you know, Raga Amen jungle days, when jungle, like the first wave of it kind of transitioning over into drum and bass, like early Metalheads era stuff was like early Metalheads, early Prototype records, early 31 records, Doc Scott, stuff like that.
How did you even hear it? How were you aware of this scene in the first place?
It was actually my best friend from high school, my buddy Bill. Big shout out to my homie Bill. He actually went away to college at Middlebury College in Vermont, and he basically befriended a bunch of ravers, and he turned me on to like all this dope music. Honestly, like I have to say, like my biggest like kind of exposure to the kinds of music that I've participated in, the kinds of scenes that I participated in, have been from two of my best friends. One of them has been from my buddy Bill, who is, one of my best friends from high school. He went to Middlebury. He came back. He played me LTJ Bookham's Logical Progression, and my mind was blown after that. And I was like, this is it. Like, sign me up. Where can we go listen to more of this? Saw LTJ in Boston, and it was like the most mind-blowing thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. I was just like, damn, I didn't even know anybody could like mix records this smoothly.
Right.
I was like, this is crazy. Like, when did the transition happen? Like, I was like, my mind was just blown, And then the other time was when I was in college, and my roommate at the time, this guy Noah, also one of my best friends, still comes out to our shows to this date. He was at our Brooklyn show that we just played. Big shout out to Noah. But he was the one that got me into the whole IDM thing.
Okay.
Like Warp Records, Planet Mute, like all that stuff, which eventually led to me releasing my first record on Planet Mute. So those two guys were extremely instrumental in exposing me to the electronic music that I've become a part of today. But yeah, I mean, back in Boston, it was we were very lucky, and that jungle and drum and bass was, I guess you could say, it was kind of like the predominant of the big four, kind of like rave genres at the time. It was literally like house, trance, techno, jungle, drum and bass. Those were like the four things. And then everything else after that was like pretty much not really played and stuff. Yeah. So we were just very fortunate in Boston that, jungle and drum and bass was so well supported. And there was this other night on the other side of Boston, closer to Cambridge, or it might be in Cambridge actually, that's called Elements, that was thrown by this girl, Lenore, who still throws it to this day.
Yeah, it's the longest running in the country, right?
Yeah, longest running from bass night in the country, next to Respect. Yeah. But I still think she takes the cake. I'm still pretty sure her night is the longest running. I think Respect is the longest running on the West Coast. That's right. But hers, it's in Boston, still at the same place, Phoenix Landing.
Phoenix Landing, man. Yeah, legendary.
Yeah, big shout out to Lenore. American drum and bass icon. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. And it's every Monday, right? It's a weekly Monday.
It is during the weeknights. I forgot which night it is.
I think it's every Monday. Yeah. I don't know if it was always that way, but yeah, that's because I lived in Boston for a couple of years, much later. And I mean, I would go out to it then, and it's still
hats off to Lenore. Absolute
it's incredible.
Icon.
It's incredible. Were you like doing anything musically at the time? Like maybe even before you started going out to these nights? Like, because I know you were like a theater kid at a certain point. Mm-hmm. Were you just kind of just doing a lot of artsy stuff as a kid?
Yeah, I was into grunge and alternative, wrapped up in that like whole like era of like, Nirvana and Pixies and like all that kind of stuff, and playing guitar and stuff like that. But literally, it was like literally the moment that my homie came back from college and played me LTJ Bookham that I was like, this is it. This Gangstar Wu-Tang, like, it's a wrap, man. This is all I need to listen to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's fun. I mean, that's exactly what Josh just said, is like the first time you saw the people loading in and went to their event and heard it the first time. You're like, that's it. I just got to
I mean,
and after.
I can't think of like any other like moment like that in my life where it's just like hands down, like this is what it is that I've been looking for. And, I knew at a young age that I was into music. Like my parents got me a drum kit when I was like 12. Bless their fucking hearts, because I'm sure it was like a menace playing, 5 kids in the house, me in my room playing drums to like, Ministry and Nine Inch Nails. And then,
Yeah.
For a few years, I was into that whole kind of like hardcore metal industrial sound and punk and stuff like that. And it was like, boom, instantly. I mean, I literally changed overnight. It was like mind blown. Electronic music. It wasn't even really drum and bass. It was literally trance music, but it was just like the sounds. I was like, I don't know this. I've never heard this before. And kind of like went down that rabbit hole, went to a few of those parties at that venue. A lot of trance and kind of like hard house stuff. And it was also LTJ Bookham that I heard that was it Logical Progressions or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember just like, smoking a joint in someone's backyard, and it just came on, and it was those little chirpy bird sounds.
Demon's theme, man. Dude, the second I heard Demon's theme, it was a wrap, man. It was a wrap. I was just like, my mind was just like blown to bits. I was like, okay, I just need to hear more of this. Just like subs, shreddy amen breaks, and kind of like ambient pads, and birds chirping, and we're good.
Yeah. Well, he put out this mix album that I listened to. I think that was my experience. Like Logical Progressions is amazing, but for me, I heard the mix album first. I think it was called Progression Sessions. It was him and MC Conrad. And I listened to that. If you could wear out a CD, I would have worn out that CD. Yeah. Like it was just over and over. You know what's weird is he's one of the few, like my few DJ heroes. I've never seen him play a set for whatever reason. I just never caught him. And it bugs me to this day.
Oh, dude, his mixing chops are like nothing else, man. It's so clean and seamless, man. Like you literally cannot tell, like what's going on, or like the blends are like so smooth. They're so slick. Dude, there's no one else like him, man.
Yeah.
He's an absolute legend. Also, no one else mixes records as long as him. Is down to play two records together that long,
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that's another skill that's gotten lost to a certain extent in the current paradigm. I mean, I think there's still amazing like house and techno DJs who will do some long mixes. But I mean, back in the day, especially when it was all on vinyl, it was almost like a flex to be like, oh no, I can keep these 2 records mixed for 5 minutes,
Totally.
Yeah, again, and that's technology too, to a certain extent, sort of changing what's hard to do and what's impressive. And yeah, maybe like once the CDJs got so advanced, you could do so many other things that then a long mix wasn't as exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think for us at one point it was kind of like, well, we've mixed vinyl, we've mixed CDs, we've mixed in Ableton. And, it's like we've done all the versions of DJ mixing. And it was kind of like, okay, like we've mixed, right? We've mixed hundreds and hundreds of hours of music, and kind of like, I think, we were like, what's next? Obviously that kind of like became more performance based. How do we play it live? Even to this current phase of us, when we did this tour, we played 2 modular boxes that Ed built out, so Ableton playback. And then we were just jamming these like crazy modular effects boxes. And I was like, we don't, we weren't really essentially like mixing like DJs, but we just found like a new way for us to play technology, play this like new love of modular gear. It's like, how do we play those things, but it's interesting because like we've been talking about like, all right, let's get back together and just like do DJ sets. Like, let's just, go back to like, mixing tunes. So it's all coming back around.
Yeah. It's so interesting, man. I mean, when you were writing the records for the album, did the production process change? Were you making music differently than you had in the past?
Yeah, because, stylistically, we really strayed away from the way that we've done things in the past in Glitch Mob. I mean, obviously, historic Glitch Mob, I think like the tempo ranges generally tend to be in like hip hop tempos. And obviously on this new record, there's none of that, using, essentially fast classic rave breaks, whether they be slowed down, jungle breaks slowed down to like 135 or 140, all the way up into, jungle drum bass territory, 160, 170, even 150. We got to cut at 150. These are all tempos that traditionally we haven't really touched upon. In the past, we've touched on 128, we've done some kind of like more kind of like, like Ed Bangery influenced kind of like, electro house kind of style stuff.
Right.
But we were off in complete uncharted waters. Also, the sound palette that we chose from, really trying to stay true to a lot of the classic rave sounds. And as a result, we really got away from the whole kind of sawtooth bass style thing that we've done a lot of in the past. Like a lot of the sounds were on this record. Yeah, like I don't think we had any of those like crazy sawtooth leads that we're really known for. Those like kind of glory lead style sounds, like a lot of the sounds on this record, aside from like all of our crazy amen drums and stuff like that, everything was like rolled off like around 7K pretty much. There's not like a lot of top end in those synths and stuff. So the production techniques were very, very different this time around. And it was so exciting. It was so exciting to like really get away from the way we've done things in the past, and it was liberating. It was exciting and freeing. And yeah, we're just having a blast. Like, remember Josh and I, like, because we went out to Utah to write this record, and there'd be countless times, we'd be like working on the tune, like in the studio, blah, blah, like 3:00 rolls around. We start like cracking open some beers and like, smoking some joints, and then boom, it'd just be like, we would just be locked in and in the zone, laughing our asses off, like drunk and stoned, and just kind of like, just like totally locked in all the way till like about 10 p.m. And then like basically driving back to the place that we were staying, which was like 5 minutes up the road at the owner's house. Like basically the owners that owned all the land that we were staying on. We were staying at their house. The studio was like 5 minutes down the road. Driving back there, just like blazed out of our minds, like listening to like what we just made and just being like, dude, this is so sick.
Yeah, we were like having such a good time, and it really, I think, shows through in the music. It's like it was so much of writing this last batch of tunes was just so fun. It was like freeing because we were exploring a whole new territory and simplified the sound palette. We weren't spending endless hours crafting these like crazy synths to make some super unique thing. It was like, no, let's just get some pianos. Let's get some 808s. Let's get some amen breaks and like chop it up and have a good time, and just let the energy of what was happening in the studio and the kind of flow of it be the dictator, as opposed to like, well, this sound is not wild enough. It needs to be blah, whatever. It's just like, no, let's just like roll with it and like let that be the story, and just have fun. We had such a blast doing it. And yeah, like Ed said, we were out in Utah there. I don't know, like I'll kind of just preface that whole thing. It's, we got invited to use a studio out in this tiny, tiny town in Utah, where this couple owns hundreds and thousands of acres of raw land in southern Utah. I mean, absolutely stunning, gorgeous.
Wow.
And this couple just like built a studio right in the middle of the mountains, like on a creek. And it was, I mean, absolutely brilliant. And we got invited to go work there with them, and well, not with them, but like to be a part of,
sure,
what they're trying to do out there with the land and the studio and everything. But it was, historically we have done that. Like we've gone to Joshua Tree, we've gone, here and there, we've gone different places to expose ourselves to different landscapes and different energy to see what comes of it. And it was so funny being out in this like pristine land. I mean, it was absolutely stunning, you know, and we're making like the most crazy raw fucking drum and bass breaks shit that it's like, it's polar opposite of like when you walk outside and look at the mountains. It's just like, you know, you would expect a very like, I don't know, ambient record coming out of that place, but we just like full bore into just like psycho rave music. And it was very freeing. Yeah. It was very liberating to kind of like allow ourselves to do that and have fun and just like not overthink it and just roll with it and just keep going and just kind of like keep pushing each other to be like, yeah. Extend that like another like 2 minutes. Fuck it. Like,
you know, going back to what I said in the beginning, you know, it's like at this point in our careers, you know, it's really like, you know, I mean, we've done it all, you know, there's like nothing left to prove. There's nobody to try to impress, you know, in the studio or whatnot. So yeah, exactly what Josh was saying, you know, like we weren't trying to be noisy out there, like trying to like push the benchmark of like where production can go. You know, it was like the polar opposite. It was actually just keeping it just about the vibe, you know, and as long as like the vibe was dope, it's good, you know, didn't have to have over the top crazy edits or insane sounds or whatever, you know what I mean? Just the vibe just had to be on point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it was awesome, man. I mean, it was dope. That whole experience was killer.
I think that energy comes through the record, man. I mean, it's definitely, I'd say like the rawest record I've heard from the Glitch Mob. And I think it's a little more of that like direct connection. I think the energy, the fun you were having, like to me, it all comes through. Of course, I love that shit anyway. That's my roots too. So, you know, it connected for me, but it's cool to hear you guys talk about it, man. Cause I think that's another, you know, we've sort of talked about like with how big North American EDM is in this day and age. I think that's something that's missing is kind of the sort of raw presentation of the music, you know, and just in general, like regardless of genre, regardless of what it sounds like. But I think that approach is just so much more rare in this day and age of like everything is so thought out now of like, how is this going to fit into the stage show? How does this affect the brand? What kind of content?
How does it stream?
Yeah, stream, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. What's the political, you know, chess what collab do we need to collab? Which DJ do we need to collab with, even though we're not really down with their music to like, you know, kind of push the needle forward or whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, man. We're not here to hate on any other musicians out there or anyone else like in the scene or whatever trying to do their thing. Not at all. You know what I mean? Like much love to everybody out there killing the game. For us personally, it was just, you know, it was just time to do something different.
Well, and to me, I agree with you, and I'm not out to shit on anybody either. But to me, it's almost like what you guys are doing to me seems the smarter way to do it, because you gotta, you know, you stick around long enough, we've all seen, you know, people go up, people go down, sounds change, trends change, all of that. And if you cling to any one thing too long, you know, it's going to sink under you eventually, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like one big thing, you know, that I think the pandemic really put a lot of things into perspective for us. And, you know, Josh and I have had extensive conversations about this. Was, you know, like we've been around for a long time. We've been very blessed to have like a very long career, right? You know, and Josh and I definitely had many conversations of like, you know, not wanting to be comfortable being legacy artists or being those artists that, you know, we pull up, you know, we do the business, we play your favorite song, you know, we put on a decent enough LED show on the stage and, you know, just like handle the biz, do the thing, whatever, you know what I mean? That has never been something that felt dope to us, you know, like for us, it's just kind of like, yo, listen, you know, it's like, it's obviously apparent we've been at this for a while. Nothing's guaranteed, you know, who knows how long this is going to last? Is it going to last for another year? Is it going to last for another 20 years? Who knows? But, you know, like for us, we would like to go out there every single day as if it was our last and just be like, hey, man, we left it all out on the court, you know, and like, that's what Control Our Reality was about. It was like, hey, man, it's about time that, we wrote a record for us,
Yeah.
that we would feel super stoked about and that really embodied who we are. We've spent, the past 2 records essentially, kind of like writing music more with the audience in mind. Obviously, the creativity was primarily dictated through the blade, thinking about how the music would be presented through the blade on those massive arena style shows.
Yeah.
The Red Rocks, the Coachella stages, like those level kinds of things. And, it was about time to like really detach from all that and like really get back to a place of like remembering why it is we do what we do. Because when you're caught up in that whole entire paradigm, the production arms race and the whole like, American ethos of like grow everything bigger, better, more massive, more bigger, more better. Your creativity just gets wrapped up in that whole entire thing. You really can't really see the forest from the trees. And your main focus becomes just wanting to constantly smash it bigger, better, harder, sell out more things, and the spirit of why you do this thing called music in the first place gets lost, and for us, it was important for us to get back to that place, like, more just like the simplicity and the purity of like, why the hell are we out here making music in the first place? Why do we do this? Get back to that place. And, that's really what the spirit of Control Alt Reality is.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what Ed was saying kind of led into this tour that we just did, where it was like, the reason why we do it is to have this fun, connective moments with the people that want to come out and be a part of it, right? It's like, yeah, we're making music that we want to make and we love, and we're putting it out on all the platforms and everything, and we hope people love it and enjoy it and stuff. But like, also, like we want to go play that music. We want to go share it on a live, venue or whatever. It's like, but we just saw it differently. We didn't want to go do it necessarily on these like bigger, better, badder kind of situations. It was more like, actually, let's like rein it way back in and go do it in these like smaller places where we can feel connected to the folks that came out, the culture. It's like, that was really the point of it, was like, we wanted to feel in it with everyone and not like, okay, yeah, we're here just to put on a show for you. Thank you for coming. Thanks for buying a ticket. Blah, blah, blah. Like, we wanted to be in the audience. We want to be in there dancing and feeling it. And it's like, after many years of doing this, it was kind of like, I don't really feel in that same place. At the time, it was just like, I'm on this big stage. I got my in-ears in. I got, I could see all the people and everything. It was just like, yeah, it's like, I don't know. Like, I want to be experiencing the feeling of all this stuff that we're creating, and I think it was like part of like why we tried to bring it back down to like ground levels. We wanted to have fun doing this too. I think it got a little bit maybe lost in the mix. I mean, we always have great time together. It's like, we always put on our best foot forward and just like try to make the best of everything. Like Ed said, it's like, this could be all gone tomorrow. But we really wanted to kind of bring it back down to like, nah, let's just do this raw style. Like, we don't need any of that stuff. I want to feel it. I want to be on the ground with the people,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was also like, taking it back to like something that was like, how do we throw a party that we would want to go to?
Right.
Not to say that we wouldn't want to go to a Glitch Mob show in the past 10 years and stuff.
Of course.
I mean, quite frankly, when I look at those kinds of shows, those kinds of like, high production value, big shows and like big venues, the amount that I've gone to is few and far between.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think in the past 5 years, I think like something like of that level that I actually wanted to go out and go see, I think I saw like Bicep or something like that, and that was pretty much about it. So, it's like, but, these kind of like underground parties, this is something out here in Los Angeles, like, yeah, Josh and I, we're going to this kind of stuff all the time. So getting away from the whole kind of rock star and audience and like cult leader follower type of thing. And yeah, just coming back down to earth a little bit more was really what the ethos of this whole entire thing was all about. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, hey, like, you know, to all the artists that want to go do that thing, that's totally fine, you know?
But I do think you're right that it's a little lonelier of a path to be that sort of, you know, cult leader, as you say, which I think is pretty accurate. Like you know, yeah, it's much less than about you being part of a community and much more kind of about you being this other thing that people sort of stare at, you know? Mm. And it's, Ed, for you too, I have to imagine, like, coming from your background, you know, like doing low end theory in LA for so long, which obviously was, you know, very much a community based event, and bringing through so many artists and like seeing all these new artists like get a start there and go on to flourish and grow and all that. Like, was that part of it too? Like, I wonder for you guys, because I think Glitch Mob has always been hard to categorize, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard to say, like, probably hard for promoters to like know what stage to put you on, that kind of thing. Yes. Mm-hmm. But for you guys as artists, like, is there anything going on right now? Like, do you look at any younger artists, any up and comers? Like, do you catch some of that energy? Was that some of it too?
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, it's interesting. We've almost come full circle. You know, it's almost, we're coming back to, you know, a place of kind of participating in a culture that is a little bit more, like low end theory centric, not musically speaking, obviously, right, but the community aspect of it, which was something that was, you know, I think for a long time in Glitch Mob, at least for the past, I mean, I would even date it back to Drink the Sea. You know, I think like we really existed on our own island. There's no one else out there trying to make Glitch Mob sounding music. We're the only ones doing that thing. As you said, you know, it's hard for promoters to even categorize where to put us on a stage. You know what I mean? For a very long time, we existed on our own island. And I think the previous model of how we operated worked for us. You know what I mean? But it's a very lonely place to be, you know? And it's been nice to kind of, I guess, you know, so to speak, like return to the underground. And like, obviously we're DJing music that makes sense with Control Alt Reality. Obviously there's like, you know, the rave revival thing is in full swing, you know what I mean? Across the pond, you know, between the Club Glow, Denim Audio, L Major, 4am crew, like all those guys kind of doing the like 130, 140 slowed down jungle thing, all the way up to the guys that are, you know, really doing the jungle revival thing, you know, Tim Reaper and Coco Bryce and like all those guys, to the guys doing turbo, like, you know, like Samurai Breaks and Polo Lillian, those guys. And, you know, there's like a lot of music out there that makes sense with Control Alt Reality, especially since Control Alt Reality traverses almost every single prominent old school rave tempo that there is.
Right.
So that's been exciting to kind of have a sense of community, be able to big up the next generation of kids who are killing the game. That was one of the most exciting things on tour, you know, is that we're on tour with Anna Morgan. Obviously, her reputation speaks for itself. If you kind of like look at kind of who's kind of like carrying the torch for at least kind of the whole underground rave, modern rave revival thing stateside right now, I think like look no further than someone like Anna, right? And it was inspiring every night to be on the road with her. She kind of like reconceptualized what we thought was possible, like in a DJ set. So as a result, you know, we started reaching out to like a lot of these kids across the pond whose tunes we were into. And you know, like the amount of love that we got back, the tunes that were sent, it would literally, you know, I'm just so grateful. It'd be the kind of thing where we'd literally be like downloading a tune in the Delta Lounge in the morning, slotting it in on the plane. We'd be playing it that night, you know, and it was sick. You know, it was like, that's the kind of energy that we were after with this record. Whereas like previous version of Glitch Mob, when we were playing the Blade, I mean, first off, we just play all Glitch Mob music. There's no playing anyone else's music. But then secondly, something like that would have just been so impossible in the Blade paradigm. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was just nice to, you know, kind of like, you know, go from existing on our own island in Glitch Mob for so many years to finally coming back to kind of, having a sense of community again. And like, especially in Los Angeles, I think there's a lot of parallels happening in Los Angeles to what's happening in London. You know what I mean? Obviously, out in London, the whole like, obviously drum and bass has obviously always been a prominent thing out in the UK.
Yeah.
But the real deal jungle thing, especially primarily headed up by female DJs, like people like Sherelle and stuff like that, that's like a real thing out there, amazing. Right? But in Los Angeles, that's also a very real thing out here. Like Anna and her whole crew, her whole female squad of DJs that like really rep the whole like underground rave sound hard. That's a big thing in LA, from like, girls like Mapamoto to Dara Genesis, Bianca Oblivion, Star Eyes, like Wolf Baby, like all like that whole thing is a big thing that's like bubbling beneath the surface out in LA. And it's really cool to see, man. It's dope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like what Ed said, to kind of mirror that, I was like, yeah, it's the first time in our career we can align with other artists and feel like we could collab together, we could trade tunes, we can play other people's tunes. It's a community-based feeling, and that was something I think we were starving for. Was like, okay, we've done the island thing. We nailed that. We got mansions on islands. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but we wanted to get off that island and feel a part of a scene again, And historically, that's just not what Glitch Mob ever did, and not for any specific reason other than it's just the way the cards fell, right? Like you said, Willie, like promoters didn't know where to put us. There wasn't other people making the kind of music that we were making. It all fell into similar tempos and obviously like rhythms and things like that. It's just our version of it was like so out of the box in another place. It never really worked with anything. And like now it does, and it feels really good and rewarding and kind of like, I love this. I love this feeling of like, reaching out to like the younger generation of artists, and all these guys and gals making tunes. It's like, oh, I love what you're doing. Send some stuff over. Here's our new record. And it's just kind of like this cool, obviously there's no new thing. It's like that's what happens in electronic scenes, right? From the beat scene and happening in the States right now. It's like all those cats are all sharing music and doing flips and collabing and, that whole younger scene, of just like bass music producers and things like that. It's like, that's a big part of it. Yeah, it feels extra exciting for us to be a part of kind of like this underground rave culture conversation again, because it's where we come from. It's where we felt most comfortable, even in like the bass music beat scene. It's like, love all those cats. And like, we are homies with obviously so many people, yourself included. It's like, there is this beautiful scene in the States, and we'll go to every show under the sun, support our homies and stuff like that. But will we ever be playing those things? Maybe. And if it did, it was very much like a specific reason why, or like Glitch Mob's this own little thing over here doing it. But it it's like, it didn't really ebb and flow in the conversation in that type of way. You know what I'm saying? It's like now for the first time in a long time, since before we even really started making music together as the band and the group and stuff, it's like we're kind of back to that raw root level of like, yo, we just made this like crazy tune today. Let's send it to Anna, like maybe she'll play it this weekend and she's sending over this stuff. And that, it's like, it's the conversation that's so fun to be a part of in the community and stuff. So, which I think is so important in music,
Yeah. I talk about that idea of the conversation all the time, man, and just participating in that conversation. Like that's what it's really all about. That's all I wanted to do when I started off. I didn't want to be the world's biggest superstar. I didn't necessarily want to be a millionaire, any of that, but just like, I just wanted to be a part of this thing I thought was so cool.
Totally. Totally.
And that at a certain point, that was really my only goal. And so it's cool that you guys kind of came all the way back around to that. I mean, we talked about sort of where you came from. We talked about where you're at. I think just to wrap it up is kind of like, where are you going at this point? Like, are you guys cool here? Are you chilling as long as this is fun, kind of riding this new wave? Do you have ideas of other shit you want to do? Like, where is your head at now?
I mean, like, I think for the time being, we definitely want to continue down, the current vibe and sound. CTRL ALT REALITY is in, continuing to embrace the revival of, like, kind of like the underground, old school underground rave sounds that are happening. Yeah, man. I mean, Josh and I, we've got a lot of stuff planned, man. Yeah, we just wrapped a tune like literally today and stuff. And, like, I think like anything is now fair game for us. Like, as you said, like, maybe things were like a little overthought or whatnot. But now it's like, yeah, man, fuck it. Let's just like collaborate with, like, these kids across the pond who are feeling, pump out some singles, release music on other people's labels. You know what I mean? Like, anything goes. Like, let's just try anything. Like, whatever just feels fun and exciting. Let's just keep it that. Just keep it like, like a good vibe. Don't overthink it. As I said, like, there's no need to try to impress people with like over the top production tricks or like whatnot or like gimmicks and stuff like that. And let's just keep the real thing the real thing. You know what I mean? And like keep moving.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
I
like the way you put that. That's good.
Yeah. We hit we had our own internal great reset, you know what I'm saying? Like, we hit the reset button hard on so many things. Obviously the sounds that we were coming up with, the tempos are new for us. Just like really mentally, the way we saw glitch mob and kind of were like where it was headed, like all of it got the reset button, not just stylistically in the studio, just kind of like we opened all of the doors and we wanted to embrace that, like other labels, smaller artists, whatever, this and that, just like try anything and everything right now and see what works and what's fun, and not overthink it, obviously. I think that's just kind of where we're at with it, and we're just kind of rolling with the excitement and the energy that we're feeding off of right now, which is obviously very much like community culture based, but the excitement that we're having with each other, like working on tunes together, making demos and sending them back and forth and being like, yo, this is crazy. Like, what? They're like, dude, let's do this one. It's like, that wasn't always the conversation. It was a lot of like, all right, we're in demo phase. Let's like really sit down and like, craft this thing for the specific reason and this and that. It's very open right now. The format has been very like widened for us that we can kind of explore. Yeah, like there's not a lot of guidelines other than like we really are enjoying and embracing this kind of like rave revival thing that's happening. It's like it means so much to us. So like that's the only thing we're kind of like using as like, guidelines right now. So it's
Right.
kind of, we'll see, man. We'll see what happens,
Well, it's great. I mean, two real quick points on that is, the rave revival thing. What I like about what you guys are saying is that, it's not just a revival of this sound that is kind of just like a fun sound to do, but it's also like a revival of that culture, right?
Exactly.
And that community aspect of it that maybe got a little lost. And I think some people can kind of forget that you kind of got to have both for a real revival of that energy. And then also just the idea, this is something I talk about on the podcast all the time, just you got to follow the fun as an artist. Like if you ever get lost, that's always the guiding principle. If there's a secret to success, that's probably what it is.
Of course.
All of that is just following the fun. And so it's great, man. It's like, it just makes me happy to see you guys stoked and having fun with it. And the record's fucking great, man. I miss you guys. It's been a while.
Yeah,
too,
it's
man.
really, really nice to see you, brother. Yeah. I was thinking about our last podcast that we did years ago. I think it was See Without Eyes, and just how easy and flowing and everything it was. And I've been really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you for having us, man. It's a real pleasure.
Dude, pleasure is all mine. Thank you for doing it. And yeah, we can do this many, many more times, but we'll end this one here. All right, dudes.
right,
have a
brother.
great rest of your day, man. Thanks for doing this.
Of course.
Peace.
All
man.
right.
All right.
See ya.
Peace, guys.
Bye. Later.
Bye.